All right, thank you all for joining us. I want to start by letting each of you just introduce yourselves and, let the families know out here kind of the work that you do. That would be helpful. Liz?
Push the button. Okay. Hi, I'm Liz Berry-Kravis. I'm a pediatric neurologist at Rush University in Chicago, and we have an Angelman Dup15q clinic, but we've been involved in clinical trials for translation of disease-targeted medications for numerous rare diseases, starting with Fragile X back in the 2000s. And so we have lots of other rare neurodevelopmental and neurodegenerative disorders that we do trials for and work with all of the family advocacy organizations.
You guys already heard from me this morning, so Nasha Fitter again. I'll pass it on to Yael.
Hi, everyone. Very happy to be here. Yael Weiss. I'm the CEO of a company called Mazi Therapeutics, and we focus solely on rare neurogenetic disorders. And would love to learn more about Dup15q, your community, and spend time with all of you. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. My name is Allyson Berent. I'm the mother of a beautiful little girl named Quincy who lives with Angelman syndrome. I also am the Chief Science Officer for the Foundation for Angelman Syndrome Therapeutics, also known as FAST. And I was part of the founding team of a company that started an ASO, developing an ASO for Angelman syndrome called Genetics Biotherapeutics, which is now entering phase 3 clinical trials in partnership with Ultragenyx Pharmaceuticals, and have advanced 2 other gene therapies and a CRISPR gene editor for Angelman syndrome through an accelerator that we started at the foundation.
And my name is Sam Quigley. I am father to Eamon, who is 11 years old, has IDIC, so isodescentric Dup15q. I'm also the CEO of Kicho, and we're trying to develop an ASO therapy, much like what Allyson was able to do for Dup15q.
All right, so I'm going to open it for the first question. Anyone can jump in. I hope you all do. As we work as the Alliance to move from advocacy to a treatment, talk about the role that families need to play in that, because it's very difficult for us to get there without their involvement, obviously. So just from your own perspectives where you sit, it'd be great for folks to better understand why they're so important to getting to a treatment.
I'll start. I mean, there's a lot of folks who are doing really great work. There's a lot of really fundamental research going on. There's a lot of translational research going on. A lot of companies trying to develop therapies. And I'm excited about that, and I think we all should be. But at a fundamental level, no one is going to care as much about this as we do, as parents do. And so no one's going to have the sense of urgency. No one's going to have the drive. No one's going to push as hard as parents will. And I think that is the core of what makes parents different here. Not that there's not very important roles for everyone else in the stack to play, but that's what makes parents different.
I would say that I think parents play every role. I think parents are absolutely critical, and nothing can move from advocacy to therapeutics without parents. Whether that's a parent who understands science, whether that's a parent who doesn't understand a lick of science, or whether that's a parent who just wants to figure out what the options are for their child and the hope for their future. We started our own companies, now 4 of them, in order to advance therapeutics for our kids as an advocacy organization, because other very intelligent, well-minded, and well-intended people in the pharmaceutical industry was just not doing it at our pace. They were not doing it with priority, and they were doing an amazing job, but we were one of 50 indications, and we were probably at the bottom of that list. And I wake up every morning like you, and I go to bed every night like you, and I have to tell my daughter, tomorrow's going to be a better day. And I can't do that when I keep hearing every year for 8 years that a pharmaceutical company is 18 months away from a clinical trial. And I heard that when she was 5 months, I heard that when she was 18 months, and I heard that when she was 3 years old. And I realized if we didn't do this ourselves, maybe nobody would. And that was something I wasn't willing to wait for. I was not willing to take that risk. And this isn't something that was developed by a parent. This is something that was developed by our entire community of advocates that wanted a better life for their kids. And we couldn't do it without every single parent in the Angelman community. They all participated and contributed, whether it was fundraising, whether it was just having the hope, whether it was willing to listen because knowledge is power and they wanted to understand it and get it. But they were behind us. They were advocating with us, as was the rest of the pharmaceutical community who was giving us the advice to do it. It's not like parents just developed a drug on their own and says like, well, I'm a veterinarian, I can figure this out. Like, it's really complicated, it's really hard. But we have people like Yael and you know, dozens and dozens of consultants and other members of our team that got it through and were able to do it. And now we've been able to show we could do it over and over and over again. We can't do it without families. We couldn't do it without our foundation. We couldn't do it without our academic researchers who were supporting the mission and the vision. So it is a huge team, but families are absolutely the groundwork for that team. And without the families and the parents, it would have never happened, for sure.
Okay, I want to say something about rare disease drug development and family participation. This kind of drug development is not magic. It doesn't just happen, oh, we have a drug, now we're going to treat people, and then we're going to get it FDA approved. One of the reasons the Angelman ASO trials have been able to move forward so well is that many families for many years participated to create the very excellent natural history that they have. And so family participation, even before there's a treatment, even before there's anything that will help, lays the base to speed up that development when the treatment is available. So I think it's tremendously important for families to really look at, can I participate in a natural history study? Can I participate in a biomarker study? Can I, even if I might not want to be the first person on a new drug because I'm a little worried about safety, can I help lay the base for those drugs to eventually be approved? And I think now in Dup15q, we're getting to that point where we can see in the future there are therapies, but we also see we're missing a few things in terms of understanding the trajectory, fully understanding the condition, understanding what is the, being able to model the developmental rate across all the different, you know, highly variable patients with the disease. And so I think if there's a study that looks like it's needed to help lay the base for future therapies, everyone should participate, because that's how we get to the end.
Anybody else?
So I agree with Liz about the participation of parents very early on. So Mozzie was started because of Allyson and FAST and what they did, and my realization that many groups, not only Angelman, but also Dup15q and many others, are actually funding research, participating in understanding the disorders and getting drugs developed, which was not something that was happening 10 years ago. This is all very new. So many groups are doing it, and without really knowing what's ahead of them. So Mozzie was started in order to take programs that were funded by advocacy groups and take them into the clinic and hopefully commercialize them. And as we're going on this journey of working with advocacy groups and taking programs forward, and many of these disorders, just like Dup15q, have never been in a clinical trial before. So the regulators don't know the disorder. A lot of physicians have never heard about it. Definitely not your local representative or your senator. They don't know anything about it. So you need to be very active in educating everyone around you about your disorder, what it means to you. Because when we go to the FDA and say, hey, we have a therapy for Dup15q, they will ask us, what is the value proposition? That's what they ask about. What does your drug do that makes it so good for this community? And we need to explain to them that talking, walking, behavior issues, all these things that they've never heard about before, because they don't know anything about Dup15q. Now they need to understand that what you're living with on a daily basis is improving, we need to find a way to show it to them. So one is you talking to everyone and explaining what your life is like today and how you would like to see it improved. And the other is we collecting all the information in a formal way in a natural history study and showing the regulators, this is what this community looks like without a therapy. And now look how we were able to improve their lives, improve the lives of the kids, improve the lives of the families with the therapy. And we cannot do it without you. We need you. We need your input. We need you to participate. And I know it's a burden. I know it takes time, but questionnaires, interviews, registries, they're invaluable to us. And the more information we have, the better informed we are when we develop a drug and when we take it to a regulator and say, we want this drug approved because we know it's working. So it's critical for you guys to be very active and help us as much as you can.
I don't have much more to add, and I already lectured everyone this morning. I will just say that I think you guys are so lucky that you have a parent that started a company that's developing a drug. You're luckier than many foundations out there. You've got really great clinicians. I mean, Dr. Liz Berry-Kravis is the best of the best, and she's here, she's on your team. I mean, it's really, and then even, the companies you have here are incredible. Mozzie, BridgeBio, like these are companies that truly care about rare diseases, that do a lot. So I do think you're in a great spot, and the work you need to do around participating in natural history study, fundraising, that's really, I think, what this community needs, and you're well on your way.
And just so everyone's aware, I know we talked a little bit about the science symposium that was over the last few days that we had with all the researchers. Yesterday afternoon, Sam, Liz, many others were part of what we're talking about isn't far in the future. We were talking with all involved, from pharmaceutical partners to clinic sites, alliance members, all about a natural history study that's really starting now. Shefali is starting it at SOAR, and some of you have already been part of it. But it's about the measures. What information is important. How do we best get that without making it as big of a burden as possible? So all of this is happening in real time for the Alliance right now. And so it's super relevant, all the things that they're talking about, because this is the path that we're not just going down, but we are on, right now. I would love to hear, I think our families would love to hear examples, and they could be your own, it could be organizations you've worked with, or those that you just know of, that have had success, meaning starting with, it could have been a patient advocacy organization, moving to a treatment, how that happened, through clinical trials, all that. What are the success stories that these families should know about to know that, we could create a treatment that that really does impact the lives of their children?
What do you ask?
Everyone's looking at me. Well, it's because we're there, and it's still early days. But I'm as much as I am thrilled and humbled to share the successes of these stories, which I will. We all have to always keep in mind the risk of everything we do, and we have to understand, this is paving the way and creating a path, and what comes with that are trials and tribulations. And how do you get enrollment? How, from the start of launching the trial to enrolling the trial to the outcomes of the trial. And every drug we give to our kids, whether it's a gene therapy or a gene editor or an ASO, and we're so lucky we have gene targeted therapies for our two sister brother communities, for Angelman and Dup15, because a lot of disorders don't even know what gene they're dealing with. So we're in such a good position for that. So what I can tell you is that the most exciting part from the start of this, when we launched our first clinical trial, and now there's 4, 3 ASOs, a gene therapy just cleared IND, will be dosing their first patient in only a couple of months. And you'll see the data come out with these disorders. But the most positive part was the hope of the community of what could happen. Understanding they've been educated on risk for 10 years. But what most of the world doesn't realize is the risk us parents are willing to take. What they don't understand is the risk of doing nothing versus the risk of doing something. And people that really highlight the risk are generally those that don't live with a rare disease like ours. They're generally someone that doesn't have sleepless nights and living through seizures daily. So one thing for us was the clear vision of hope. And then we dosed patients. And now there have been over 350 patients dosed around the world with an ASO for Angelman syndrome between 3 companies. And now they're almost finishing one of the phase 3s and just started another one. There will be 900 or 850 patients dosed with an ASO by the end of this. And we're gonna have a lot of incredible, incredible data. The first set of data that was shared with our community was open label data. So we all have to take that with a grain of salt. What does that mean? That means there was no control comparator in the sense that, is there a placebo effect? Meaning, I want this so bad, I'm gonna see what I wanna see. And every drug has a placebo effect. And open label studies are riddled with that. So now the phase 3 studies are controlled in a way in which they're getting a placebo or a sham, so you don't know what your kid got. And therefore, the effect you see is real if it's better than the control arm. So that's really important to understand. Gene therapies are not going to have control arms. So you're going to have to really see a transformative change for something like that to be successful. But what I would tell you is that I'm just going to speak about anecdotes. And Liz can speak about this and corroborate, because this is public information. There are kids who have words that never spoke a single word in their life. There are kids who sleep 10 hours a night that never slept more than 3 hours a night, which means their families sleep 10 hours a night, having never slept more than 3 hours a night since that child was born. There are kids that are self-feeding that have never used a spoon and a fork. There are kids that are swimming independently and diving to the bottom of a pool for a toy that could have walked into a pool and drowned, which is the leading cause of death in Angelman syndrome because they're obsessed with water, but they can't coordinate their body to swim. There are success stories of kids with significant behavior challenges that can now sit in a restaurant and have a meal with their family. And it's interactional and not transactional. These are huge to our families, and these are minimal to people that don't live with our diseases. And so the hope of those anecdotes drives our community to possibilities. But we all know failure is possible too. It's the hope that is therapeutic as much as the outcomes. And I think it's important to realize that because it's really powerful. And you just have to see ultimately what happens, being prepared for the risk, being prepared for the benefit, and then figuring out where it lands.
I think this also speaks to the importance of the natural history, because even though all 3 of those trials were open label, the natural history was very good, and they were able to show that all 3 of those trials were showing a faster developmental rate for the patients on treatment than in the natural history. And that really helps move forward into, justifying the phase 3 trials. So we see those anecdotes, and we go to the FDA and tell people, well, this patient got toilet trained. Well, that doesn't look like a cure to the FDA. So they need to see what is the natural course, that those patients weren't going to get toilet trained unless they went on the ASO. So I think, again, a plug for natural history as being tremendously, tremendously important in rare disease. But, I've seen many other examples of like a family foundation basically moving the earth in terms of developing treatments and understanding the disease. I work in a super rare disease called Niemann-Pick disease, which is a degenerative disease where patients develop normally for a certain period of time, and then they gradually lose all the skills they developed and they die. Well, when the Notre Dame football coach, Eric Parsegan's grandkids got diagnosed with this disease, he created a foundation which pulled in all the families and raised money. That foundation literally funded all the work for the gene discovery, understanding what's going on in the disease, what is the molecular mechanism, and then a natural history study and early trials. And we now have 2 drugs approved for Niemann-Pick type C this year and expect to get the most potent one approved hopefully within a year or so. So that foundation made all the difference. If that foundation had never been formed and, started to develop the work, we'd still be, the NIH would be funding like 1 grant a year on Niemann-Pick type C. We might not even know what the gene is. So so family foundations can make a huge difference, and participation from families. Again, there was a natural history study, which has been critical to getting these drugs approved. So there are lots of success stories like that. There are other stories where there aren't drugs approved yet, but the Family Foundation created a clinic network, or in Fragile X, for instance, and then the clinic network became the network where we could run clinical trials, and the clinic network became the place where the natural history studies went on. And so, but also participation. Every conference we talk about how important it is to participate, even when there's no therapeutic agent yet, because it's important. But there are lots of great stories. And then one last advocacy story I want to tell you. It's really important. Sometimes the FDA really doesn't understand what is going on in the disease, and this has been particularly true for degenerative diseases that are in a different division than Dup15q or Angelman syndrome would be in. But there was a person who was the director of one of the FDA, of the division that many of these degenerative diseases were, doing trials in, who was requiring like 3-year placebo-controlled trials in a disease where the placebo patients were going to lose brain function for a very long time. And so there were about 4 diseases that got together and wrote long letters to Congress and the FDA. And even though the scientists had been arguing with this person for quite some time, and the clinicians, it was the advocacy of 4 very strong advocacy organizations that got thousands of signatures on letters that allowed the FDA to move this person to another division and bring in someone who's much more receptive to rare diseases. So never underestimate the power of patient advocacy. It's actually more powerful than anything we can do as doctors.
Sam, I think this opens up. We've heard a little bit, some examples. I would say that many of you may have watched a video with Dylan and Sam during the Big Give when we were raising money. Was it a month or 2 ago? I think your video got more comments than anyone else's, which is fantastic. But not everyone here saw it. Talk a little bit about where you're at with Kecho and the ASO development and what you need to get from where you're at to a treatment.
Sure. Yeah, I'm also going to be talking about some of that tomorrow morning. So Kecho is a company it's really just me and some contracts and some, lawyers, but really all the work is happening at some commercial labs and some academic labs around the globe. The Kecho story really was directly and extremely inspired by Allyson's story and FAST and the success that genetics had developing an ASO for Angelman. And the idea is basically, it looks like the technology exists today to develop a therapy for Dup15q. No one is really moving quickly towards actually applying that technology to our kids. And so someone should just step up and push that rock up the hill. That's the rock I'm trying to push up the hill. To Allison's point, I don't know what a therapy like that would do for our kids. I look at my son every day, and I have in the back of my mind, right? I don't know what that will do. I do think that there's good reason to think it'll be positive. But the stories, like the anecdotes that Allyson was mentioning about the Angelman kids, like every time there's a data drop from Ultragenyx about their trial, it's like I'm downloading the PDF and scouring. There's a lot of reason to be very hopeful about what this could look like, and a lot of reason to be excited, frankly, right now. I think that I've been I've been working on this for a number of years. Eamon's 11. I've been paying attention to Dup15q for a long time now. But it feels like now is a time when pieces are coming together, when there's natural history studies getting off the ground, when there's ASOs coming close to the clinic, when there's just a better understanding of UBE3A and its role. Start getting lost here, but I think that now is a very exciting time to be pushing this and to be working on this, and I think that we all do have reason to be hopeful. It's not done. It's not done yet. It's not clear what will happen. It's not clear if it'll work, but we should be excited, I think.
and what are the next steps? I know, and so for everyone out there who has done a walk or contributed to fundraising and things like that, know that some of the money that Dup15q Alliance is investing in all this is to Kecho. We believe fully in Sam and what he's doing. We want to see more. What are some of the next steps you see needing? Liz, you look like you want to jump into.
When I started this, I had hoped that it would be as simple as taking some existing technology and applying to this one little case, and then boom, you're done. Like, ta-da, it works. It turns out that that's not quite the story. There's a lot of complexity in there, and in a lot of ways, it's a roller coaster. When things are going well, we're going to change the world. Our kids are going to be saved. And when things are going poorly, everything's terrible and nothing works. So it's a roller coaster for sure. Right now, we have a lead candidate that we like. We actually have a bunch of candidates that we like, and we are testing them in animals. There's two main things that you care about when you're testing these things. One is efficacy. Does this thing do the thing that we hope and expect it will? And the other is safety. Does this thing do anything we don't want it to do? Does this thing cause problems? Does this thing cause... And both of those are complicated, especially on the safety side. I think I don't need to say this. We need to be very careful about anything that we develop. We need to be very careful about what the effect is going to have on our kids long term and short term. And short of actually putting it in a human, it's going to be hard to tell, right? You can only work with processes. You can only work with animals and try and study them. And there turns out to be a ton of complexity in even injecting it into the animals. So there's a lot of work there, and that's where we are right now. I'm hopeful that we are near the end of that work, but I have been continually surprised over the past few years just how much work remains around every corner. So.
Well, we certainly appreciate everything you're putting into that. Question for Yael on seeing what we're trying to accomplish here. What is it that biotech leaders need to see from communities like ours before deciding to invest in a treatment, or a clinical trial?
That's a great question. It really depends how big the company is, how it manages its portfolio, and what the goals of the company are. So I would say it's very different between a big pharmaceutical company and a small biotech. In general, there's always a team inside the company that looks at many indications and says, okay, let's multiply how many patients there are times how much money we can charge for the drug and see if the number comes up nice and we can show our investors that we're going to make a lot of money from the drug. So that's very simplified, but that's how many companies work. They need to show that they're going to be developing a drug that will generate revenue and satisfy their investors. So again, this is why it's so important that the community does a lot of the heavy lifting, such as what FAST did and what Nasha did with FOXG1. Know how many patients there are, where they are located, do as much as you can to find more patients and to corroborate that there are more patients out there that can be treated, because companies want to know that they have a lot of patients that they can treat. Having a biomarker, having natural history, that's always an advantage, because the more information is available for a company to make decisions, the more likely they are to choose the one that has more information than less information. And things change, especially in companies that are under financial duress. It's not a great time now for biotech or for pharma, and they will make decisions to drop programs or to keep programs based on the information that they have. And you want to be ready to pick up a program that was dropped and find a new home for it as well. So the industry is in turmoil now. It's not an easy time to raise money for rare diseases. It's not an easy time to raise money for genetic therapies. So this goes back to what I said before. Educate everyone that you can on how important it is to have these therapies so that they don't drop them. But if time comes and a program is not picked up or is dropped, make sure that you know where it can go next. If that first home didn't work out, let's find a new home for it, rehome it and find a good place for it.
One thing I would add on that too, as an advocacy group that's getting much more invested in really thinking about that next step of biology to translation and really supporting and funding a lot of that work, which is the only mission of our organization at FAST, is to support that translational research work. And we have our partnership with the Angelman Syndrome Foundation, where it's much bigger in advocacy and support, and we're much bigger in translational research and advocacy. And so that partnership's really important. But one thing I would say, as you're diving more into the translational research component, and I think Sam is astute enough to know about this, but like, you guys will fund other companies and other groups to do a lot of important things, and academics to do a lot of important things. And this, it used to be controversial, now it's clear, but you need to have the ability to own or license and take it on, because what happens is academics generally do most of the most amazing work. Almost everything we do comes out of an academic institution. They're so important, but it also can get lost there. And if you don't have the ability to understand when there's a go decision that it should move to clinics, and when you need more information, it's going to always lean on it needs more information. And that's going to be a hamster wheel of a lot of money, a lot of time, that never actually gets all of the answers, because you learn new things, you find new questions, and then there's more things to answer. And then there's this vicious cycle of knowledge, but it's not moving forward. And you can grow that knowledge base, which is so important, but you also need to move forward to the reason and the mission and the North Star of why you're doing it, which is to help patients. And now that I've worked in industry, and now that I consult with every drug developing company for Angelman syndrome and non-Angelman syndrome, I have realized how little most companies care about the details of the mechanism of action in the biology. Does it work? Yes. Let's move forward. And I was trained in an academic institution. I'm a clinician scientist from academia, which is like the why, the why, the why, the why. And the why grows, but progress can't happen if you don't try to do it at the same time in a responsible way. And so as you fund things, it's important that you have the one option to see it through if someone else won't, or to claw it back if someone else said they're going to do it and they actually never do. And then it's sitting on a shelf in a pharmaceutical company, which 10 programs in Angelman syndrome are, and nobody can get them back because the company doesn't even want to put together the data room to have you look at it to buy it back. It's insanity, the amount of work you fund that goes nowhere. And it's because we weren't smart enough to realize we need clawback rights on our contracts. So as you fund these things, it's important you're really careful on how you design these contracts and these negotiations, not because you want to own everything and run anything and make money. My only return on investment is the improvement of my daughter's life. But I want to make sure it doesn't sit on some shelf and we'll never know. And it's really important, because you're right at that point, that you think about that very carefully.
Great. Thank you. All right, we're gonna. I have kind of a lightning round question. Two questions I like everyone to answer, and then I think we'll have time for a few questions out there. So think about what you might want to ask these excellent panelists. Okay, so it's kind of a two-part question. If you could give one call to action to the Dup15q parent community, what would that be? And what gives you the most hope right now that we're on a path to finding a treatment for Dup15q syndrome?
I'll start. I mean, I think that echoing what Liz said, the thing that we need most right now is natural history data. I think that is very clear. Even if one of these ASOs gets close to the clinic, which I think they will soon, we're not going to know how to measure the efficacy. We're not going to know how to measure whether or not that thing works until we have much better natural history data. So I think that's the thing that we need to do the most urgently as a community. In terms of things that give me hope, I mean, I think that the number of, there's certainly now a bunch of companies that are working on ASOs. I think that the ASO pathway is getting a lot of consensus building around it, and it's clear to me that it is likely to work at least. So I think that we will have something. It might not be perfect. It might be, a version 1 of a therapy for our kids, but we're going to have something soon. I think that that's clear, and I think that that's exciting. That's good. I'm glad.
Liz, you're itching to go, Liz.
No, I would second that. I think the thing that is most needed right now is natural history. The other thing is biomarkers, because in rare disease, biomarkers are tremendously helpful in terms of telling you if you're on the right path, and sometimes they can even be used for drug approval, but that's difficult in rare disease. And then
Sorry, can you explain to everyone what a biomarker is? And
Oh, okay.
everyone may be aware.
Okay, biomarker is some biological readout that you're impacting the disease process. So like if you're doing a gene therapy and you're replacing a protein, you would be able to measure the protein being replaced, and that would be a biomarker. Sometimes we don't have a convenient protein to measure, especially if our disease affects multiple genes, as it does in Dup15q. So we use kind of a more down the line biomarker, like an EEG pattern that's present just in the disease. Biomarkers are useful because they don't have a placebo effect. You can't create a placebo effect, so you can really see, yes, this drug is impacting the disease itself, or something that reflects the disease itself that's measured biologically from the body. And so Shefali has great data on an EEG biomarker, this increased beta, which can definitely and should be used in trials, and we probably need to characterize it even more, but it's a good marker, and it's ready to be used as a trial. But will it be a readout for every kind of treatment? We don't totally know. Having a protein biomarker or some kind of pattern of proteins or something that was abnormal in Dup15q that isn't that you can compare to normal people is always a very useful thing, and then you have to do a lot of work to validate that. But the first step is sometimes to get samples from patients that will allow you to do the work to find the biomarker. And that's something we discussed a lot yesterday at the meeting on the natural history study, is how can we get, unfortunately for brain diseases, often blood doesn't help us that much with biomarkers, and we need to get spinal fluid, and that's something that's been discussed in the field. How can we get spinal fluid from individuals of Angelman or with Dup15q syndrome? And this seems like a big request and like a crazy thing to ask, but sometimes we do projects where if a patient has to have an anesthesia for something like an endoscopy or ear tube placement or dental work or something like that, we can add on a spinal tap and get the fluid we need for those biomarkers. So that's something, this isn't happening just yet, but I think this is something we were talking about, and I just want to, bring it to the community's attention that this is a dire need in the field. And so we may be asking you to participate in things like that if we can figure out how to get it set up and through our IRBs and stuff. But otherwise, the collection of natural history, Shefali has some natural history, and that's good, but it's not where it needs to be for use as a comparator in a clinical trial, for instance, like a gene therapy or an ASO trial. So I think that's the biggest need right now, and then later on there will be different needs as there begin to be actual trials of things.
So my call to action is a little bit more specific, starting with parents to loved ones who are older, in their teens or 20s or 30s. I've seen some of you around here. First of all, don't give up. You will be part of the trials. You will be included in most clinical trials. We are running a study for Pitt Hopkins. Angelman is running a study where they're including people in their 40s, 50s. We're including people in their 20s. But more than that, your information, your participation in clinical studies and in natural history studies is critical, because you have lived with Dup15q more than a parent to a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old, and that your insights, your information, your learnings are really important for us. So please don't move on to the next stage of planning and Nasha and I were just standing in the corridor talking about what happens after you die. I know you start moving to that way, but please don't give up on the clinical trials and everything that's happening now, and plan for later as well. And my other call for action is for people who go to daycare, OT, PT, and there are people there that do not have a genetic diagnosis. Please urge them to get a genetic test, because everybody deserves to have a genetic diagnosis if they can. And as I said before, the more patients that we know about with Dup15q, Angelman, or any other genetic disorder makes it more attractive for industry to work on your disorder. So please tell everyone, get a genetic test. It's so important.
Okay, mine is also very specific. Walk out the door when this is over, go to the citizen booth and sign up for the natural history. It takes less than 5 minutes. That's all you have to do. The platform does everything. You cannot complain that that's too much burden. It's literally less than 5 minutes, and Mikkel is out there to help you. So that is my very specific call to action. And I'll just say what gives me hope is the story that Allyson shared with what she's seeing in the clinical trial and what I hear from the Rett syndrome clinical trials. I think neurodevelopmental conditions are really primed for these genetic therapies. Unlike some other conditions where the whole body has to be affected, we're really trying to focus on the brain. We're seeing really great results. And I think, Yael, to your point, yes, there's a lot to hope for and to think about what the future is for our kids. So I'm really excited and really hopeful for the future.
I would say my call to action, and I've talked with the Dup15q Alliance now for a couple of years, particularly in the last year, about what are the steps to take to get there, which you guys are, in the last year, have done amazing work in order to get there. So my call to action, I have one for the community, but I have one for the Alliance, which is to make it very clear to the community exactly what you need and why, and what the outcome of that is. Because if your best shot on goal today, which you may have many, but let's just say your best shot on goal today is Sam. What can we do to support Sam to get there for our kids? And the reason I say that is because this is my call to action for the community, is that you need to tell your story. You need to share your story. You need to understand what is meaningful to you for change. You need to make that very, very clear. And I think what it is, because I know so many of you. And I have so much optimism that what you're going to see with a gene-targeted therapy is going to be profound. And that's going to be profound to you. It may not be profound to somebody who doesn't live with Dup15q, but that doesn't matter. What matters is, can your life get better? And a lot of people tell me, you really shouldn't instill false hope in people. There's nothing false about hope. That's a contradiction. That's from people who don't live with despair, and they don't live with incredible need to hope for a better future for their child. And what I can tell you is I've always lived with huge hope, and it's never been false. It's been 100% true. And I have not been disappointed. Yes, there are trials, there are tribulations, there are complications, there are risks, there are adverse events. And I have lived through all of those things. But what I can tell you is, on the other end, my daughter is a different child because of an ASO. She's a different child for her sisters. She's a different child for me. She's a different child for her. And if there is a slice of hope that that can happen for you, I would do everything you can to get there, because you have no idea what it does when it changes a family. It's huge. And diverting yourself and diluting yourself too thin can make that take longer. So what does Sam need? I would write that down, figure that out. What do these companies need? Have them write that down, figure that out. And how can you help them get there very, very definitively and clearly? Natural history is one, but there are going to be other things. And I would make a very clear plan and have a community rile up and say, we're going to do this year. You have to know what you're going for, know what you need, know what it costs, raise the money to get there. Because these people can do it, they need the money to get there. Nothing is untangible, it's financially limiting. Great place to be. You can find the money. You can't find the science. The science is there. That's my call.
Thank you. I saw a lot of nodding heads and some teary eyes out there because I think we all feel what you do, Allyson. All right. Any questions out there for this fantastic group of panelists? You got a microphone? Yep. She's running a microphone over.
Can you hear me? Okay, there we go. I really just want to say thank you. And you never know who's going to be in a crowd like this. So I'm the general counsel at Wayne State. We have the biggest single campus medical school in the country, former tech transfer director at Michigan State, grandfather to Emma, and father to a medical graduate from Rush, and who I think was one of your students. I really want to thank you for your comments about being practical as this research and these efforts are approached. Higher ed needs kind of a kick in the pants if we're going to be partners in trying to actually find practical cures to things and not just do basic research. So, Matt, I'm offering myself up. Is it Matt? Mike. I'm Mike too. Offering myself up as a resource in terms of approaches for dealing with academia, because we need to make sure we're helping them orient to a solution and not just to the journey. So I'm really just saying thank you and want to make connections with all of you.
Thank you.
Hi there. Thank you all so much. This question is for the parents. I think one of the things that I struggle with is, okay, I think I could be good at this. I think I could do this. But how do you find your niche? I was listening to Alice and I was like, okay, maybe I could role model after her. And then she goes, oh, I'm a clinician scientist. And I'm like, oh, dang, I don't check that box. So how do you figure out where your talents, the Venn diagram of your talents and passion and what is actually useful? Where do you find that space?
Just because you call my name, I'll just say that. It's almost trial by error. You have to see where the gaps are and what gaps you can fill. I'm a veterinarian, and I'm a veterinarian who develops medical devices and runs clinical trials. How does that relate to genetic therapy? Zero. But what I do know is I know how to talk about risk. I know how to talk about benefit. I know how to talk about options. I know how to think outside the box. That allowed me to be a great communicator to families about options. It allowed me to think outside the box of what people were telling me the options are and what they truly are, and think a little bit more critically and also think a little bit more abstractly in creating solutions that maybe aren't on the table yet. So if you're in advertising, it may be how you can message what Sam needs. Right? If you're in marketing, it may be figuring out a way to get the campaign going so people are attracted to how to raise the money to get there. So you can take your skills and do anything. You can empower yourself to do absolutely anything. And it doesn't have to be mastering the science. You have Dylan for that, right? But you can support Dylan in any which way. You're an educator. Educate this community to understand the science in a way in which maybe Dylan can't. So you just think about what your skill set is, what drives you, what's your passion, and participate. And I guarantee you'll make a huge difference.
I would echo that. I don't have a background in biology. I'm learning what I can, but I'm definitely not, Mr. Biotech guy, or wouldn't think of myself that way. My background is in technology. I was at a bunch of startups. So for me, it's natural to start a company to do a thing. And that part I think I understand how to do. And everything else is just trying. Right? You try something, see if it works. Didn't work, try something else. And I think we just all need to push, right? There's no simple path, there's no simple recipe, do X, Y, and Z and poof, your kid's better. It's just gonna be try things and see if they work. And if they do, keep doing that. And if they don't, try something else and just keep trying.
And one comment that I'll make, I'll give you a little hint to what's coming Saturday morning. We're going to be talking about what the Alliance needs. And so we'll give you an opportunity to try to fit whatever skills everyone out here has. It could be as a board member, it could be helping put on a gala. I mean, there's a number of different things that we could use help for to get to where we need to do. And we're going to be talking a little bit about on that on Saturday morning. Any other questions out there? Jackie.
Can anybody hear me? Okay. Thank you again for the panel. I know the answers to some of this question, so I would just like to hear from you guys, though, if you could tell the room, how much does this cost? So we're fundraising for it. This is a big goal of ours, but like real numbers, it's not cheap, right?
So I could tell you for us, since we've done our financial analysis, for us to take our gene therapy from beginning, so starting with building the mouse models, all the way to a confirmatory trial, and we're hoping to get a phase 1 to 3. So if that doesn't work, the cost would be much higher. We budgeted $22 million. That's how much it costs. If we have to do a phase 3 trial, it's going to be much more, and Allyson would know the numbers there. So it does seem like a lot of money, but when you break it down to the number of families you have, each family raises a certain amount, and you start to get like $1 or $2 million checks coming in from larger donors, you can do it. So I know it seems astronomical, but it is possible. But yes, this is what it takes. This is not a cheap endeavor if you want to really do it.
ASOs are cheaper. That's the good news. Gene therapies are crazy expensive to treat small numbers. ASOs are almost equally as expensive, but you could treat much larger numbers because the manufacturing is very different. But there's more than just running the trial. There's more than just the drug development pieces. There's also the natural history study, which could, depending on where you do it and how many sites you have, could be $500,000, $250,000, or $3 million. Every piece has a price, but when you think about one candidate to go from declaring the human candidate drug to finishing a phase 2 clinical trial, the average, depending if it's a small molecule or if it's a gene therapy, is between 10 and 20 million, 25, I think we quoted $1 million, for a decent population, which Dup15 is. Think about all the other pieces you need next to that, it gets a lot more. But you bite off what you can chew. You do one step at a time and you prioritize what it is you actually need next. You raise for that, and then you go to the next step. We didn't raise $100 million in one day. We raised it in pieces, and that allowed us to get to where we are. And so we just needed to know what we're asking for, and we found the money to do it because we asked for exactly what we needed, and then we were successful in accomplishing what we said we were going to do.
Other questions out there? Sarah?
Yeah. Please no. Just didn't want to make her run all the way to the front of the room. As a continuation of the cost questions, probably Nasha and Allyson, in hope for Sam, how did you build early credibility with investors or industry partners to get some of that funding?
I had the least credibility, so I'll start. She has the most credibility, and I'll let her finish, because I started as a veterinarian who was a mom. And I could tell you that I expected, because honestly and frankly, like when I first got diagnosed and I would talk to scientists, I was often discredited as, well, you're just a mom. And then when I was like, well, I actually develop medical devices and have 6 patents and 100 publications, and I have a CV that you may not care about, but it actually exists and it's scientific, I got a little bit more credibility. And then when they would hear me speak about the genetics of Angelman syndrome, I earned more credibility. But the initial reaction, you have 5 minutes to introduce yourself, is limited credibility. What I realized is, to investors, I had huge credibility. To the academic clinicians we were trying to convince to work on Angelman, I had the least credibility. And it's the respect you see in the first 5 minutes of the conversation. And when you can elegantly tell your story, when you can speak and answer questions about the disease, regardless of your background, and when you can be honest and clear on what you know and what you don't know, you earn credibility pretty quickly. And I would say that at the stage where we started our first company, it was mixed, but we had people essentially begging to give us money. This was also 2019, so it was a good time. And we made a selection of who we were taking money from based on who we believed in would actually get it across the finish line. Now that things are a lot harder, what I can tell you is that us as parents have zero credibility issues. People look at us with such awe and inspiration, and they want us on their team. So even though it's a hard market right now, I am finding people are still coming to us being like, we'd like to invest in Angelman syndrome because we believe in you, because you did it. You've proven yourself that you could do it. The disease has proven itself it could do it. And I believe you will do it for the gene therapy, the CRISPR, and the rest of it. So I want to put money in you, not me, our team. You know, so you earn your credibility, but what I found was with investors, it's easier, actually. It was the academic researchers that were like, okay, Mom, I was a little condescending, frankly, at the beginning, until I had to earn that respect that they believed in us and that we actually had a clue what we were talking about. So it's a little bit different. So from a money perspective, I didn't feel like I had a lot of trouble, but she can tell you otherwise because she was one of the first people I went to asking for money.
Can you send some of those people over my way?
You can understand that she was able to convince me because we did end up taking the program at Ultragenics. I think a lot depends. I would say it's different for investors and for pharmaceutical partners because the credibility that you need for one is not the same exactly as for other. And it kind of defines what your personality as an organization will be. Are you a drug development group or are you seeking a partner group? Or maybe you're both, but you do have to focus, I think. But if you decide that you're a drug development organization, then you go ahead, you do as much as you can with the resources that you have, and then you go to a potential partner or to an investor and say, look what we've done, look what we achieved as a community, and this gives you the credibility. If you want to be like, I don't know, give example of SYNGAP maybe, they are not a drug development organization, they only talk to partners and try to convince them to work on their disorder, then it's a whole different story. You need to come with, these are the tools that we're providing you as an organization, use them to develop a drug. So it really depends what you decide to do as a group and where you focus and maybe you can do both. I don't know that you're now doing both, right? But in the beginning you started as a drug development group. So once you have a success, the road is paved, but you need to get that first success in order to open the doors for others. So focus, I guess.
Thank you. And I know lunch is out there. We're going to let Jose ask one last question, and then we'll break for lunch. Go ahead. Try it again, and it should work. There you go.
Hi. I just wanted to ask if, like, this 20 million, let's say you're telling the number to get there, is in that path a stage where you have, I don't know, you've invested 10 million and you're starting to be how to say the word, attract to a pharmaceutical company to co-invest with you? And a second question, how is your thoughts on AI and all the improvements that now are all that are developing, if that could maybe reduce the costs of getting there and the time also? Thank you.
I think to the first question, you know, the number of dollars it takes to get from zero to a drug in patients is a large number, and we know that. And it's probably, this community is not gonna raise that by next week or next year. But we can think about it in terms of milestones. We're gonna raise money, we're gonna, fund, Kicho is gonna build the next phase of this project and then the next phase, the next phase. And as we do that, as we get closer and closer to the clinic, we are removing risk from the drug, right? It's getting more and more likely that this drug will work. As we get a natural history study, it's more and more likely that a clinical trial could be successful. As we do all of these things, we're gonna get more and more likely, more and more chance of success. And as we do that, I think that the pharmaceutical partners will look at that program, will look at the program and say, gee, I was scared of it 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when we didn't know much about Dup15q. But now, as it gets de-risked, as it gets more and more likely to succeed, it's a more and more attractive investment opportunity. And I think that that is probably the point of best leverage that we have as a community. We're probably unlikely to fund our own drug from zero to everything by ourselves, but we can get something pretty close and get it attractive enough that some partner will pick it up and help take it the rest of the way. And that's I think the best leverage that we have as a community right now is to do that. On the AI part, I'm pessimistic about the current status of that, but maybe the future will be bright. I don't know.
I think with AI, it's really interesting. I think where AI will help is to find more targets, more molecules that can be associated with targets, potentially with ASOs, with sequences and toxicity. So I'm a little bit more bullish. I also, live in Silicon Valley, so I could be brainwashed. But I think there's quite a lot that AI can do in healthcare in terms of early drug development. Unfortunately, a lot of the expenses with drug development happen after. So AI is not going to be able to help with, testing toxicity in monkeys, for example, but we might be able to use algorithms to maybe decrease the number of monkeys that we need, as an example. So there's still things in drug development that are, you still have to do a clinical trial. But we are seeing some really interesting, the use of synthetic control arm. You could use algorithms to understand, instead of using an actual child, we could run some really interesting modules and find out what would happen in a certain situation. So I think there's a lot. One thing we see in healthcare is kind of the last industry where technology really is able to disseminate. We see it happening in many other industries first. But I think I am pretty bullish. I don't know how dramatically it's going to reduce costs in the interim, but I think there's things to be excited about.
All right, thank you, everyone. Please give these guys a round of applause.